It's week 43. We are on day 1 and we're continuing in the Gospels. Today we're going to go to the Gospel of John, chapters 7 through 9. And so we're going to see some stories that are unique to that Gospel. One thing that's important to realize as we look at the Gospel of John is that John framed it according to feasts in the Jewish calendar. Today, specifically, we're looking at events that occur during the celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles in Jerusalem. Now, the Feast of Tabernacles really had two purposes. The one that most Israelites at that time would have celebrated was the harvest time. And they would actually set up impermanent structures, temporary structures, tents, so that they could be out there in the fields during the harvest. But additionally, the Feast of Tabernacles was also a reminder of their far past and a time when the Israelites, after having been brought out from the land of Egypt, lived in tents during their wanderings in the wilderness. And Jesus' teachings during this time point to who he is as Messiah, at the same time using references that would have been fresh in their minds during this festival as they thought back to the time that Israel spent wandering in the wilderness. So hear these things maybe in a new light for us as Christians who don't have as deep of a background in these Jewish feasts. The first thing that we see is that Jesus calls himself the living water. And that sounds like a wonderful thing. We won't thirst anymore. It reminds us of the Samaritan woman at the well. But Jesus' use of that term, living water, during the Feast of Tabernacles reminds the people about how God produced water from the rock in the middle of the wilderness, a story found in Exodus 17. So Jesus' references referred back to events in the great past, but then bringing them into the future to say, hey, I am this living water. I am God who created and made that happen. Another one, Jesus as the light of the world, refers to also the pillar of cloud and fire, which was God's presence, God's Shekinah glory that led the Israelites through the wilderness. A great reference to this would be found in Numbers 9, verses 15 through 23. And then, really, the most telling is that Jesus identifies himself by referencing God's name, I am. Now, you might remember that this is how God tells Moses that he can let the people know that he's talking to the one true God by saying, I am has sent him in Exodus 3, verses 13 through 15, which is the incident at the burning bush before Moses goes to the people. You know, sometimes you will hear people say, well, you know, Jesus never claimed to be God. Well, as far as the Jews were concerned, yes, he did. And here are 3 very distinct ways that Jesus referenced to himself as being a deity, being God. He is the living water. He is the light of the world. He is the I am. And so for the Jews who were there, there was no question that Jesus was claiming to be God. If Jesus is God, and can we trust him to be the living water that refreshes our lives, the light that will guide us on our way, and the great I am, who is over all and in charge of everything? Glory be to God.